Hello and welcome to today's episode of Rock Enroll, the enrollment marketing podcast created by VisionPoint Marketing. For today's episode, we're going to talk about, the recent week's news around the Department of Education and more so what to do when there is so much uncertainty and change in front of our enrollment marketing peers across the nation. And I'm so excited to be joined by Matt Walters, our strategic consultant, and Sarah Mullins, one of our fantastic strategists. Both are vision pointers that have worked directly on campus for an institution and on the enrollment marketing agency partner side. So I know you both can offer multiple perspectives here. So welcome and thanks for joining.
Thanks for having us, Katie.
Well, just as a little bit of let's lay the groundwork here. In the last just about a month ago now, so on March 20th, there was an executive order to the education secretary to take, I believe it was called all necessary steps to dissolve the Department of Education and transfer its responsibilities, underline transfer its responsibilities to other federal agencies. There was also a note around ensuring that that transfer did not cause a disruption or interruption to any of the essential services that that department currently offers. But since then, we have seen mass layoffs, cutting the department almost in half. That's including the Office of Federal Student Aid, and a lot of public conversation around these administrative executive orders. So, Matt, Sarah, I know there's a lot to unpack here, but maybe just as a place to start, if you were on campus, would be really curious to what your gut reaction would be right now. Where would your mind be going? And maybe it's even helpful within that big question to start with, we always say in marketing, it's all about our audience. So how about we start with the students? What do you all think is going on as part of that student experience right now?
Yeah, I think students are in this phase similar to what we saw during COVID, right? There's a lot of parallels that we can draw between the uncertainty that students experienced during that time and now. We also experienced this a year and a half ago when the FAFSA disruption was happening, and we had a little bit of a taste of what that might look like in terms of funding college. During COVID, we saw a lot of students, staying closer to home, protecting their finances as much as they could. Kind of that comfortability, people gravitate towards things that they trust when there is some times of uncertainty. So I think, your local school was probably the place that you knew most intimately. So I think that students might be considering, maybe this is an overprediction. I hope it's not, but students are staying a lot closer to home and not necessarily going out of state. Families are more willing to pay for those schools that are local to them. And then I think another thing that's really big is students considering, do I even go to school or not go to school? Are you going straight into the workforce? There's a lot happening from the value side of higher ed. We know that that's been a conversation for several years now, but students are considering, okay, if I can't pay for school or I can't take out student loans, depending on what the situation is in the next 2, 6, 12 months, what do I even go to school? Do I go straight to the job market? That is something that we're definitely seeing as a potential that students might be considering.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I think one of the tricky things about this is that, many students, I think they just don't know what exactly this change means for them and for their experience. I mean, when you hear messaging that on the one hand, like essential services should continue, there shouldn't be any disruption in things like federal student aid, and yet the department that's kind of overseeing and managing those services is being, dismantled or significantly reduced. I think it just leaves students wondering, like, well, what's going to happen? And I know it's difficult for institutions to feel like they're in a situation where students are asking good questions, like, what does this mean for me? And you feel like you can't fully answer those questions. You wish you had answers in great detail that you could stand behind and you knew wouldn't change further. And that's just not the nature of this very fluid, very dynamic situation. So I can understand and empathize with the uncertainty and maybe some of the fear, the frustration that students are feeling, as well as just what it's like to feel like, to be a marketer on campus right now. Um, marketers and enrollment leaders didn't need much else to make their jobs harder right now. It's already hard enough, I think, to recruit from a shrinking number of students that are even out there, and to convince them that an investment in your institution is a really great, wise investment at all, and certainly now. And this makes that much more challenging. So it's definitely a hard time to be faced with this kind of uncertainty for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think, thinking of those on-campus marketers, they probably have a ever-growing list of questions that they want to answer but don't know the answer to because we don't quite know the full impact of all of these changes yet or what that could lead to for ourselves or our students. So I'd be curious, Matt, Sarah, you both have had on-campus experience or are still connected with a lot of on-campus marketers. Anything that you think you could pull out from the toolbox to help in moments like this, whether that's from, past experiences. Sarah, you mentioned COVID, if there was something from that time frame, or just even, other ways that maybe we can move throughout these ever-growing question marks that are coming up right now.
I think one thing that I think we're all very well primed as higher ed professionals is, we're used to reaction, and especially during the COVID era where things were every day was in reaction to something that was happening. So I think first of all, that's really good news on our side is that campuses are definitely well prepared for crisis, unfortunately, but also fortunately. You'll never hear a strategist say this, but I think that reaction is our number one kind of tool for us to pull out of our toolkit. Um, Being in a strategic state of mind just isn't a privilege that we have right now. There is a time and a place for that, but when we see something come across our desk, we have to react to that because if we go down the strategic path of what could be or what should be or what might be, then you're going to lose sight of what's right in front of you. And that's really important in a state like this because, to Matt's point about students, they are asking a lot of questions and they need answers now. And if you go down the path of projecting potential scholarships to make up for potential financial crises, when students are asking you questions at the moment and looking for answers from your institution, then you're going to completely miss the current enrollment class, or you're going to lose sight of like the actual problem that's in front of you. So I think reaction is going to be the best kind of direction to go down right now, just based on, what students need right now.
Yeah, no, I really like what you said, Sarah, about referencing COVID. And even Katie, you brought up the FAFSA, process delays that happened, a couple of years ago, a year ago. So I mean, I think it's a good point. Marketers we have built some muscle over these last few years and how to respond to these types of unfolding situations where there's a lot of uncertainty. I do think about, the fundamentals of crisis communication. A lot of our marketers, people who are in kind of marketing and communications teams, have been well trained and have experienced, unfortunately, a number of kind of crisis moments on campus. It's a good time to draw on that toolkit of resources. You think about these types of situations, it's not so much like you're waiting and staying silent until you've got a perfect message developed whenever things settle and they're totally clear. Managing crisis is a lot more like experiencing something that's unfolding, experiencing that together almost in real time, and clarifying what you can with transparency, with honesty, and with empathy, right? Like that's really important for crisis communicators. So I think, that playbook can apply here, communicating early and often. When we stay silent, that tends to kind of fuel misinformation, right? So acknowledging that there is uncertainty happening, acknowledging that quickly, even if we don't have all of the facts, committing to regular updates, even if sometimes the message is we don't yet know this or that, we're still assessing this or that, but here's what we do know. I think being as clear and consistent, sticking to facts, being transparent is really important. And then you leading with empathy. Crisis communication is never just about information. It's about people, right? It's about acknowledging what people are afraid of, showing compassion, showing concern, and centering that message on how is this impacting real people? Because that type of empathy builds trust. So I absolutely think we can do, even marketers can do that right now with students. And one tip would be actually sit down with some of your students, ask them what their questions are, and script, clear, relatively short, good answers to those questions, and publish that type of content, point to that sort of content, have a dynamic sort of FAQs kind of an approach to this situation as it unfolds. If students have questions like, "Hey, am I still going to be eligible for a Pell Grant?" Um, that's a good question. That deserves a good answer. How can we provide answers that we can offer, even if we have to qualify those with what we don't know for sure, or what still might need to, what still might be unfolding. So I think that type of crisis comms playbook that you probably have at your institutions could be a really good one to draw on right now.
Yeah. Yeah, our students, even though, we're grappling with all these question marks every day, they still have an expectation of that Amazon highly personalized, highly reactive experience. That's how a consumer moves through the journey. That hasn't changed, even as we're watching or maybe feeling like some of the foundational pillars of what we offer are, whether being questions or just kind of living in more of a gray space than they have or could be disrupted. So I think those are all really helpful tips and tricks. And on top of that, Matt, you mentioned, it was already hard enough to do this job of being a, on-campus enrollment marketer to drive and draw students into our funnels and kind of grow their interest in our campus and then make that decision to eventually enroll. I'd be curious too, alongside are there certain challenges that we were already experiencing that now this is heightening, maybe competitiveness or differentiation or the value of college that might be top of mind for our students that our enrollment marketers should move higher up on the list now that we're going through all of this?
Yeah, I think if you are familiar with VisionPoint, you've heard us talk about the sea of sameness. It's the idea that all institutions are saying the same thing. Similar messaging, really great faculty, beautiful campus, the word innovation, the word make a difference. Those phrases and those words are all institutions are saying. And I think we're in a new phase of that, right? Where everybody wanted to kind of break away from that sea of sameness. And now we're at this, what I'm thinking is like an arms race of everybody wants to level up and keep continuing to stand out from the competition. And that's really important when you're in a state of, are you different from another competitor? Competition is going to be hot and heavy and in a state of, crisis situations. I think I mentioned this a bit earlier is that people gravitate towards trusted brands when we're in a state of crises. So I think that is one area where standing out from the competition is going to be even more important in this phase of life for higher ed. I think that's something that I really liked, a marketer that I follow on LinkedIn, Jordan Rogers. He says you can't quantify cool. And I think institutions are trying to really be quantitatively different. We have X amount of buildings. We offer this much research. We offer a really beautiful on-campus recreation center, and all of these different numbers and rankings and stats are differentiating for a temporary time. So all schools are going to be leveling up and experiencing this arms race. We need to be telling more deeper emotional stories so students are connecting with your institution, regardless if you have 5 state-of-the-art buildings or 1 state-of-the-art building. There's a connection that you need to build with these students. And that is going to be even more important in this state of, trying to stand out and trying to be an attractive, trusted place for prospective students to gravitate towards.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I feel like also there's such a conversation, not just around education, but around everything of cost and price and value. And so, even though institutions, we've been chatting with them for years about really highlighting the value or the benefits of what they're offering to their students, that's more and more top of mind. Even the fear of student debt collection resuming, as announced today. And we're recording this episode in late April, so who knows what could happen later, even in this week. But just that pressure that might be the mental weight that might be on prospects and their parents and their influencers. So as institutions are moving forward, I feel like that has been number one, but might be number one in a little bit of a different way to now respond to the current situation or the heaviness that it might be weighing on each individual right now, making the shouldn't I college decision.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Katie. I think the question of is this worth it is a loud question right now, and it has been loud, right? That's for some years now, colleges have been grappling with the fact that folks are more and more skeptical about, especially kind of a traditional 4-year degree or even a graduate degree. Um, and I think that, the way the industry's tried to answer that question has been around promoting things like job outcomes and trying to say that there's a kind of practical, applicable quality to this education and for career. And that's part of it for sure. I think right now, with a lot of potential funding uncertainty, there is more of an imperative to answer the question with calling real attention to things like scholarships and institutional financial aid. I mean, I think what Sarah said earlier is spot on. Don't, be promoting things that hypothetically might be available that we aren't sure about, but for resources that the institution does have available to help students afford it, by all means, it's a great opportunity to promote those even more loudly than you have before. So that's part of it, kind of the cost value. Um, but I think it's this the dismantling of the Department of Education, the rhetoric right now, institutions are embattled right now, and there's a loud argument happening in the public square about the role that colleges and universities play in our world. And listen, like VisionPoint, our agency exists to serve colleges. We believe in the transformative power of higher education. It is important to say that the world we live in right now does not necessarily take that belief for granted. If ever there were a moment to be more creative than we've been in the past about the deeper value of things like a liberal arts education, for example, we've got to make better arguments. And colleges, I think, have a real tremendous opportunity to exercise some creativity right now, because this is what always happens in moments of crisis. While the voices, the sort of anti-education voices, get loud, the voices on the other side of the conversation, or maybe the ears on the other side of the conversation, are craving to hear something that's going to rally them to what they know to be true, which is that education does matter. And colleges can answer that in a really compelling way. I really think that there's, not to say you use a crisis, but um, you can capitalize on moments of uncertainty to to lead forward into new ways of thinking and talking about the value of education. I was thinking too, Katie, you mentioned like stakeholders on campus and how you might be grappling with this right now. Was the expression "never let a good crisis go to waste"? Like,
Or waste a crisis.
yeah, I was a fundraiser before I joined VisionPoint. My background is in advancement, and I'll tell you, moments like this are really opportune moments for smart fundraisers to make compelling, creative appeals to your donor base. Because for folks who maybe are predisposed to appreciate what's happening right now with things like dismantling central federal kind of organizations and agencies, if there are donors who think that that's a good idea, then the other side of that argument that justifies decisions like that is that more support needs to happen for schools in a very local, regional, state specific way. Schools' own communities need to step up and take care of those institutions. So it's a great chance to turn that into an appeal, like a values based appeal to those donors. And then on the other hand, for donors that maybe are really concerned about some of the change that's happening, um, concern is a motivator to invest and to step up and take action. So I think this is a really great moment as well to be open and honest with friends of the institutions, with our communities that we're looking to kind of invest and to ask for help in safeguarding the future of our institutions and the future of our students. That's a compelling ask, and I think a lot of schools are going to see just an influx of meaningful involvement from donors and from friends and alumni and folks who want to be closer to the root of what these schools are growing into in the future.
And I think for those advancement departments or even campuses that maybe don't have as much of a well-oiled machine in those areas, your marketing team and your friends in enrollment marketing, their superpower is being able to drive people to make a decision. That's, the basis of what we're doing. And so with that, if we can bring our marketing expertise and prowess to those campus units to support them in messaging to those audiences, your marketing team can drive as many prospective students to you, but if they can't pay for college, or they're worried they can't pay for college and they don't know their scholarship options, how can we really make sure we yield and enroll them? So looking across your campus at who contributes to that journey and how can we provide them with maybe some messaging support, targeting support, marketing support to drive that message home. So absolutely. Sarah, Matt, last question for you all is, two people who have worked on a campus or still have so many close peers that are working on campus, or the people you're talking to day by day. We know that, by the time this episode comes out, who knows what might happen or what impacts that we'll have more clarity on. With that, I'd be curious if any of you all, or if either of you all kind of have last words of advice to enrollment marketers working through this or listening right now. The one that comes to mind for me is very much the mantra of, don't live in it, live through it. Keep moving, keep reacting to Sarah's point earlier, and try to stay on top of everything that you make the best decisions you can with the information even if that's not a lot right now. But Sarah, Matt, curious to what comes to mind for you all.
I think one thing is to ask yourself from prospective student lens, or from any lens really, is ask that question, what's in it for me? When you're putting out some sort of communication to the community, to students, to your internal stakeholders, whatever that case is like, what's in it for me? When you share those scholarships, when you share that update, or you share things on the website, students are going to automatically say like, okay, that's great that you're ranked #1 in the country on XYZ, but what am I going to get out of that? Kind of to Matt's point about job outcomes, like that speaks to students in some cases. So like really just position anything that you put out in your communication from now going forward is really think about what's in it for me.
That's a great note, Sarah. I was going to say something similar. I think a lot of times good marketing in other industries is about like, what can you offer, right? I think this is a good time not just to message at students, but to offer them help. If we can offer students, even if, you're not necessarily even just offering help specifically about your institution, but if schools can approach their recruitment marketing with a posture of how do we offer helpful information, clarifying resources, step-by-step processes to help students move toward a successful start to their educational journey. We would probably do worse as marketers than to like take that kind of advising, coaching, helpful posture deeper to heart, really at every stage of the student journey, even from the kind of promotional upper funnel endeavor. So, what can we offer? How can we help? How can we kind of approach our marketing so that we're really, helping students get off to a successful start? I think that's the encouragement that I would offer.
Appreciate you both joining today to talk about this and everything that's going on right now. And for those of you listening, if this conversation was helpful, or if just even having a sounding board right now would be helpful as you're working to figure out how to navigate through all of this, please feel free to reach out, connect with us, myself, Sarah, Matt, open to it. You can find us at visionpointmarketing.com. Thanks all.